Hello there, people of the internet. So I have noticed a running theme whenever it comes to people talking about these old school military surplus firearms, and if you have biases towards one thing or another whenever it comes to these old school Milsurps, you're probably going to get your jimmies wrestled by this video. But like, for example, I made a video not that long ago talking about something with the SKS. I can't quite remember what, but it's irrelevant. And I had a lot of people in that video talking about how great the SKS was and how it was, every bit as good of a fighting rifle as the AK, or it was superior of a rifle to the AK in one way or another. But a lot of these people haven't used this for any legitimate military drill or practical purpose. And whenever I have a bunch of people that go into the comments like that, I'll eventually, I'll occasionally, that's the word I'm looking for, I'll occasionally have one or two people come on and they'll talk about how they actually have to use these firearms that I'm talking about, that people say are so great. They actually have to use these firearms for some sort of practical purpose, and they'll talk about how absolutely dramatically terrible they are in comparison to their modern counterparts. Like, for example, on that SKS video that I had made, I actually got somebody who is a viewer of the channel, and they went into the comments and they were telling me about how they had to train with this for their military service because they live in Vietnam. So apparently the Vietnamese are still using the SKS for training, and he said compared to the capabilities of the AK, the SKS is absolute trash whenever you are actually trying to use it for a practical purpose. When people, enjoy the SKS and whatnot, a lot of these people are people who have, maybe taken it out to the range and like the history and whatnot behind it, but they'll claim for it to be as good as the AK. And as this Vietnamese person has pointed out, it is simply not. There are more parts that you have to worry about with this thing. If you get Cosmoline or Funk inside of the firing pin chamber, you risk slam fires with this thing. There's no way to easily mount some sort of optic on this thing like there is on the AK. You have that side rail on the side of the receiver. It's significantly longer than a lot of your AK variants out there, and you get yourself a, if we're talking about the military style, a 10-round magazine that you gotta feed with stripper clips. And I don't care who you are or what you do or just the good enough crowd that says that something like this is good enough or better than its modern counterpart. It simply is not. And that's because of the origins of this and how it came out before its modern counterpart. Just the technology of that time and what people knew about firearms at that time is what gave this its limitations. But I got people talking to me, and that's not the only case of this happening. I've got people talking to me about them actually having to use these things in practical purposes, and in Vietnam it's very much preferred to using AK over the SKS because the AK is apparently considerably shorter over there in Vietnam. I'm not sure what their standard issue AK is, but apparently it's considerably shorter than the SKS. So whenever I was told, hey, this guy is using SKSs for training purposes and they are very much hated because of the stripper clips and 10-round capacity as opposed to external mag and 30-round capacity and the much more difficult maintenance that is necessary on these things, people who say that the SKS is better than the AK have never fired corrosive ammo out of their SKS and had to clean that bad boy. You fire corrosive ammo out of an AK, not that hard to clean. Fire corrosive ammo out of this thing right here, it is a dramatically more difficult experience to clean something like this. So, both of them are chambered in 7.62x39. Yes, the SKS from a factory standpoint does have a better trigger. It's longer sight radius, so it has reasonable capabilities to be more accurate out at long ranges, but the 7.62x39 is not exactly a sniper cartridge anyway. There are people who can run it to some incredible ranges, but for the most part, if we're talking about just like military spec ammunition from a military rifle, you're going to be looking at 3 MOA as a general rule of thumb anyway, whether you're talking AK or SKS. Combine that with the fact that you've got people, in a combat zone shooting offhand at an enemy that is probably about 300 yards away or so, and accuracy is just going to kind of plummet unless you're somebody who's in a designated marksman role or something like that. So yes, although this does send 7.62x39 downrange, there's a lot of downsides with this just because it is the older model. And whenever I'm talking to people who are actually using these things, in comparison to the people who just have these biases towards these things because they like them, they're like, the difference in opinion is dramatic. I feel like if we got these people who are absolutely biased towards this firearm and they took it out and actually used it in the field and actually got to see, the effectiveness of this in comparison to the effectiveness of a modern counterpart, they would very, very quickly change their minds on using something like this. Could it get the job done? Yeah, it absolutely could. It still sends 7.62x39 lead downrange, but it's not just as good or better. As a matter of fact, like I said, the people that are actually using these things have decided that they are not only not as good, but they are very not as good. And over there in Russia, I actually have somebody that I'm talking to over there in Russia, and he is conscripted into the military force. And apparently the military over there in Russia is using Mosin Nagants for training. Well, the Mosin Nagant is colloquially named the garbage rod. It's actually a pretty decent little rifle for what it is, but it's still a bolt-action 5-round rifle. There are some accounts of these being used in modern combat. I'm not sure if it's happening over there in Ukraine. I'm not sure if it's Russian forces doing it, but I do know that there are Russians that are training on the Mosin, so that is just a very interesting little piece of trivia. I've been wanting to shoot this Mosin like for a week now, and things keep happening that stops me from coming out to the gun range, so by God, I'm going to send some lead down range. But plenty of people in the comments, I'm sure that you guys have seen them too, talk about how they would absolutely feel comfortable bringing a bolt-action rifle into a modern conflict, including things like the Mosin Nagant, because it's chambered in 7.62x54 rimmed. And people like that just, they strike me as the type of people that have absolutely no prior knowledge on how to effectively use firearms in a situation like that. Now, the argument could be made to where if you got a bunch of dudes with bolt-action rifles, then yeah, that could potentially give you some benefits, especially if you're going up against a smaller force. But if we're going to compare apples to apples, same amount of dudes with bolt-action rifles versus same amount of dudes with modern platforms, then hey, you very quickly lose your capabilities. And whenever I say semi-automatics, people automatically assume I mean like, a 223, 5.56, or 7.62x39. There are full power rifles out there that are semi-automatic, that have box magazines, that are very capable out at the same exact distances that this bolt action is capable at. The distance argument does not matter, because if we're going to compare apples to apples, if we were to compare the Mosin here to something like a PSL or a Dragunov or something like that, that Dragunov is dramatically more capable because it's an automatic platform with external magazines than this Mosin. If you compare things to the same cartridge, then you start to get a lot of those arguments completely taken away. But I digress. I'm getting off on a tangent here. Plenty of people down in the comments tell me, hey, this is fine, it will work, absolutely perfect, if not better than modern weaponry in a modern combat situation. And then there are the people that are contacting me because I run a gun channel, and that's just the type of people that I attract. People contacting me about their time in military service where they have to train on these old, obsolete firearms. Well, not necessarily obsolete, old, antiquated firearms. I like that term better. They got to train on these old weapons, and they're dramatically not as good as the modern weaponry that their military force is actually implementing. Like, for example, the Mosin or the SKS. I get a ton of people that go into the comments defending the SKS, talking about how it is superior to the AK, and the fact of the matter is it simply is not. Especially if we are talking about a situation where, God, that was so much fun. As a matter of fact, I'm probably going to make another video where I get to use my Mosin. I really like this 9130. But plenty of people down in the comments talking about how it's superior, and then I get the people who are actually using these platforms for one reason or another, and it's like, no, they're not superior at all. As a matter of fact, they are very much not superior. If you got one dude with an SKS going against one dude with an AK, especially if that AK has an optic on it or something, my God, that poor SKS guy, I would definitely not want to be in that guy's shoes. Anyway, folks, thanks for watching. Kind of a tangent video, kind of a going off on some things that I hear. simply because of a lack of experience and a lack of knowledge by the people down in the comments below. I'm not claiming that I have a bunch of experience myself, but I have enough experience with these firearms and a large plethora of different firearms to claim, hey, this right here is dramatically more effective than this right here, especially at the ranges I shoot at, but the AK is dramatically more effective than this right here. How about I get off 30 rounds with an AK and 30 rounds with this, and we'll see how accurate they are, how fast I can do it, and like, I gotta reload this 3 times to get the same amount of ammunition that I have for the AK. And I got the people that argue, aftermarket magazines, get those. Well, the aftermarket magazines have this big freaking dongle that sticks out in the front of it to where you can't effectively stack them onto your body to be able to carry multiple magazines. So if you're having aftermarket mag, you still got to load it with stripper clips, because it's just no practical way to be able to carry those things around. And even if you do manage to do that, loading those aftermarket mags into your SKS is a much slower process than loading the magazines into an AK. Not only that, but those aftermarket mags are extremely unreliable. Getting through a full 30 rounds from an aftermarket SKS magazine is just not something that you can do. The system is simply not designed for that sort of magazine. And as a result, we start to see all sorts of different malfunctions. These are literally just tools. All they are is you have a firing pin that hits a primer, ignites gunpowder, and sends, you know, a lead projectile in that direction at a certain amount of speed, no matter what it is that you're shooting at. But people get so infatuated and develop biases towards one thing or another, to the point to where they just kind of decide that one tool is better than another. Tons of people out there decide to themselves, hey, this 1891 rifle is dramatically better at combat capabilities than a lot of our modern produced stuff, and that is simply not the case. Okay, well, before I continue to ramble, I'm going to say, y'all go off, have a wonderful day. I'll see y'all in the next episode. Been a little while since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. Poor man's Garen. It's a shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.